haven't already muted, if you'll please take care of that. And I will introduce our speaker. Our guest today is Dr. Charles Davis. He is Furman's first gentleman. His wife, Elizabeth, is the president of Furman University. Charles is also busy in the academic world. He's an adjunct professor at Furman and also professor of accounting at Baylor. He had been teaching at Baylor before they came to Furman, and I think helped develop their online classes. So he was in on this online education before any of the rest of us knew it was a thing. So he is a pro at that. Charles has degrees from William and Mary and the University of Richmond, and his PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and is also, in his role as Furman's first gentleman, charged with making sure that White Oaks, the president's home, is under good care. And he is going to talk to us tonight about some restoration programs that have been going on there. So Charles, I will hand it over to you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Nancy, and I appreciate the opportunity to join with everybody today, and looking forward to sharing with you some things about White Oaks. Many of you may not realize what goes on at White Oaks, and this will give you a kind of behind the scenes picture. And I'm going to talk about the 3 R's, not reading, writing, and arithmetic, as you might have thought, but renovation, restoration, and refurbishment. So
what I expected.
No discussion of White Oaks would be complete without mentioning Mademoiselle Daniel, and she was the wife of Charlie Daniel. She passed away in 1992, and she actually left the house and everything in it to Furman University with the stipulation that it be the president's home. Furman didn't have a president's house at that time, and so White Oaks has served as the president's house since 1992. Part of the gift is also a stipulation that the house be maintained in a manner consistent with the way it was when she bequeathed the house to the university. So that's why we're doing some of this renovation, restoration, and refurbishment. So this is Ms. Daniel. She hangs in our living room, and we try anytime we have an event to have fresh flowers beneath her picture, and most of the time those flowers are from the gardens here at White Oaks. She was a big gardener, and so we do that to honor her memory. The house was actually designed by Philip Schutze, who was an architect based out of Atlanta. And I believe this was one of his last homes that he designed. And the house was, I guess, designed in 1957 to 1959 and was completed in 1959, 1960 in that year. And so this is a picture of Mr. Schutze in the front foyer at White Oaks. He used as his inspiration the Governor's Palace in Williamsburg. And so here at the bottom, you have a picture of the Governor's Palace in Williamsburg, and there's White Oaks. And so you can see how similar in design the homes are. They are different on the inside. At the Governor's Palace in Williamsburg, the outbuildings, the side buildings are not connected to the main house. The Governor's Palace in Williamsburg has a huge ballroom off the back, which we can't see here. We unfortunately do not have that ballroom at White Oaks, which would be a nice addition for doing university events. This makes it very special to me because, as Nancy mentioned, I have a degree from William and Mary. So I spent time at the Governor's Palace when I was in school and actually studied some in the gardens there when the weather was nice. So this has been sort of like coming home for me to get to live at White Oaks. One of the things that I discovered when I started doing some of these projects were the house plans for White Oaks. And so this is a shot of this drawing for the staircase. You know, this was done back when you actually did drawings by hand. They weren't computerized, and these really, to me, are a work of art. And here you can see the stairway as it was built and compare it to that drawing. And to me, that's just a real interesting and exciting thing to do, is to look at these drawings and see how things actually ended up on the inside. One thing you have to know about white oaks and why we're doing this refurbishing the way we're doing is sort of how we have to live in white oaks. And so as you can see here, they're private quarters on either side of the house. So on the left is an area that used to be the garage. So the downstairs of that area is a den and a kitchen that were converted from the garage when David and Susan Shy were here. And above that are 2 bedrooms and 2 baths, which used to be where Ms. Daniels live and help lived. There's also an office room up there, which is where I am today, and a bonus room that's sort of a playroom area. On the right side were Mr. and Ms. Daniels' bedrooms. They had separate bedrooms and baths. So we sleep on that end of the house, we eat and do everything else on the other end of the house. It's about 100 yards between those 2 sides of the house. So we get our exercise going back and forth. What's important to know about those 2 areas is those are the 2 areas that the first family decorates with their own stuff. So everything that's in those 2 areas of the house are things that we own. We're a little more free to do things the way we want to do it. Everything else has to stay the way it was. So it's all furniture that belongs to the house. We don't do any changing. If we do, it has to be in keeping with the way the house has been. So that gives you a little information about what we can do and where we can do it. Some of you may know that I did a cookbook a couple of years ago for the 25th anniversary of the gift. And so I did some research on the house at that time. Actually found some of the letters between the Daniels and the architect, Mr. Schutze, that are down in Atlanta at the Atlanta Historical Society. And, you know, sort of this renovation idea began as they were starting the house. So you can read these letters and sort of see how their ideas were changing as they were actually drawing the plans. So you can see a couple of things I highlighted here in yellow. There was an elevator in the plans. At some point, that elevator was taken out. We would love to have the elevator because there are things up on the 3rd floor. That's our main storage area. So hauling furniture up and down 2 stories can be a problem. The elevator certainly would have helped that. And in one version of the plans, the Daniels' bedrooms were on the 2nd floor in the center part of the house. And based on this letter from 1957, they actually moved them down to where they are now. But the way she's writing, they actually flipped them. And her bedroom didn't face Warwick, it faced Road Ford Road. And so they swapped things. So it's interesting to sort of read these letters and see how the design of the house was actually changing as they were thinking about it. So let's talk a little bit about renovation. And this is probably what we've done the least amount of. So here is an area that most people don't get to see at White Oaks. This is our private den. This is what used to be the garage that I told you about. So the major renovation of the house has been this area. And so this was done, as I mentioned, when the Shies were here. So they did the sort of den area, and connected to that is this kitchen. And I believe these were also redone when the Smolas moved in. So I think they've been through sort of a couple of renovations. The bedroom areas on the other end have had some renovations as well, but not as extensive as this area. And that's sort of the extent of the renovation. We did add a carport after we got here, since there was no garage. The restoration really deals more with what we have in the house. And so everything, pretty much everything in the house is antique. We have things dating back to the early 1700s, and these are items that are in use daily. So sort of like living in a museum. And obviously one thing we have to do is take care of all these antiques and keep them in good condition. So I commissioned somebody to come in, it's probably 3 or 4 years ago, to sort of look at the collection and give us an idea about what are the things that we really need to work on restoring, tell us what we need to do, and how critical is it that we do it. Because clearly we don't have a bottomless bucket of money around here to do all these things. And it can be a little expensive to do some of this restoration work on these antique pieces. So once she had given me sort of her list, I started some restoration, and this was the first piece that we restored. This was a Queen Anne walnut armchair from about 1740. And what you can see across the top are the steps that the conservator went through in restoring this particular chair. You can see how much the fabric had faded because of all the windows and where it had been positioned in the house over the years. It's a crewel applique on top of a seat cushion. So we had to remove the applique. He redid the padding, put the applique on the new cushion, and then had the cushion ready to go back in the chair. What I found interesting were some of the things we learned about this chair through that restoration process. And you can see that across the bottom. You can see how much damage had been done to the chair. And this was just the cushion, not the actual chair itself. Through previous upholsterings where they used the nails and tacks, there was wood loss. So the guy that was doing the work repaired some of that wood loss, filled it in with plastic wood. And then he also discovered, as you see in the bottom right, there was evidence that there were at least 2 other recoverings of this chair. One of them was in sort of a salmon or pink, and you can see that little thread there. So that's not a thread from what we were replacing, but it was from an earlier upholstery. And then at some point, it was a restoration. And to me, that is really interesting. So we did this chair, and here you can see the before and after. And it took the conservator about 26 hours to redo just that fabric cushion. He didn't do anything to the chair. In fact, he didn't even have the chair. He just took the cushion and did that. So I think you will agree with me that it looks so much better now that we have taken the time and effort to do this restoration. Along with this chair, there's sort of another walnut wing chair from the early 18th century that's very similar. To me, they're sort of matching pieces. And it had a lot of trouble as well. You can see how it was faded. And so what the conservator had to do, the whole chair was covered in these appliques. So he had to first create a stencil, and you sort of see that stencil in that yellow box, so that he knew where all the appliques came from and where they would go back on the new chair covering. So did the stencil, removed all the appliques. Again, here you can see there was some evidence that this chair at one point had been covered in a gold fabric. And then you can see there on the right-hand side that at some point someone actually added plywood to the wings of the chair to build out the wings to give them a little more depth. So these I'm guessing so those appliques would fit down the wing side. Again, this learning about the pieces as you do this restoration, you can see at the bottom, people actually signed this chair when they had done some work on it. So I know that W.E. Brown was the interior decorator that Ms. Daniel used out of Atlanta to help her furnish the house. And so I'm guessing that's who that refers to. So that may be some record of sort of purchasing the chair from Mr. Brown. And then we have John Turner. And I haven't been able to tell if that's 7916 or 7976. But I'm guessing this was somebody else who must have done some of the earlier recovering work on this chair. You know, part of the sad thing is we don't have very many details about how Ms. Daniel acquired all these pieces, whether it was through Mr. Brown or through someone else. So apparently all those papers were lost through history, which I think is very unfortunate. So here you can see the before and after of this chair, and notice that it took 262 hours of work to get this chair back into this great condition. So this one is probably my favorite restoration that we've done to date. We also have clearly some wood pieces. This is a table, and I don't know the dates on this particular table, but you can see on the left side the condition that it was in and how badly, particularly the edge of the table was sort of flaking apart. And you can see on the right-hand side what it looked like after we had it restored. So the chair was redone by a guy based out of Birmingham. This table I sent up to Winston-Salem to a guy who specializes in restoration of wood furniture in Winston-Salem. Probably one of the hardest parts about doing this is finding craftspeople who are qualified to work on this type of furniture. You don't want to just take it down to your neighborhood reupholsterer or refinisher. You want to make sure it's somebody who understands all the historical significance and how to do the good restoration work. We also have a lot of gilt wood mirrors in the house, and here's one from the mid-1700s that hangs in the dining room. And this was restored by a lady in Athens, Georgia, and she's actually the one who did the big report to tell me what needed doing. You can sort of see in the red circle there where some of the gilt wood was cracked, and then in the white circle, if you look closely, you can see a bunch of white specks and white areas, and that's where the gilt had actually come off the frame. So she took it and worked on it for a while. During the restoration, she was taking photos, as most of these restorers will do, and document what's happening. So you can see that area has now been taken off. And so she was working on it, repairing it, getting it glued back on so it wouldn't fall off. And here you can see what it looked like at the end. So the cracks are a little harder to see, and she's gone back in and replaced all the areas that the gilt had come off. And so you don't see the white areas anymore. It's with the gilt. One thing I learned from her, she worked on, I think she did 4 mirrors for us, is when they're missing pieces, her approach is when she has to build and carve the replacement part, particularly if it's sort of a symmetrical mirror, she doesn't do it exactly like what was there. That way, when somebody looks at it, they can tell that this was a piece of restoration work and it's not original to the mirror. So she does it in a way that in the future, when people are repairing and restoring these things, they know what's original and what's not. Again, that's having people who know what they're doing the work. That mirror, we also found out, is backed in mercury. So we now know that that mirror ever breaks, we all need to leave the house and call the hazardous materials people so they can come and clean up. But she actually sealed the back so that mercury would not leak. Some of it had leaked out while she transported it, and that was how we knew that that was actually a mercury mirror. So those are 4 examples of some of the restoration work that we've been doing. We have some more to do, but what's taken sort of a bigger point for now is the refurbishment. Because pretty much the house was the way it was in 1959 when Ms. Daniel moved in with all her original stuff. So this is the dining room, and what's been refurbished here are the curtains. And Susan Scheid redid these curtains when she was here. The other thing that we've done in the dining room is these chairs are from the early to mid 1700s. And what was happening is when we would, this was the dining room, this is where we had to serve guests, and they kept breaking because the wood has gotten so brittle. And so I took those chairs out of use. They're now stored, and we replaced them. So on the left is the original chair from the 1700s. On the right is what we have replaced them with. And these are handmade chairs that were done by a guy in Richmond who does a lot of the colonial Williamsburg reproductions. And so he had a picture of what we had and sort of redid it. One thing you'll notice is that we changed the cushion. We didn't use the saddle cushion from the original. We went with and I forget what they call these drop-in cushions. And that was really so that if we need to recover, it's a whole lot easier to recover when you can just pop out the cushion and do the recovery as opposed to having to reupholster the entire chair. So again, trying to keep in the same manner of what was here, but refurbishing it in a way that we can actually use it. This is one of the bedrooms on the second floor. This was the way it was when Ms. Daniel did the house. And this room was always very different from everything else in the house. When we got here, this was not there. And it was actually a pair of twin beds sort of thrown together. So sort of one of the first refurbishments I did was we had this bed in storage. I thought all of our guests don't want to sleep on twin beds. Let's put this queen in here since we have it, and just sort of redid things a little bit to make it look a little bit better. And then once we started the refurbishment for real, you can see what the original fabric was on the right is what we've refurbished it with. So a little bit different in look and feel. But this is what the room looks like now. So we were able to use the original cornices on the windows, but we've come in with this newer fabric and sort of updated the look a little bit. This is what the bathroom was. And again, this is all the original materials from the late 50s. And this is what the bathroom looks like now. So that's been a lot of fun doing that one. And that was our first refurbishment room. We've now done all the bedrooms on the second floor. This was the second room we did. And another interesting thing was we have in the archives at Furman, the decorating plans that Ms. Daniel had. So on the left, you can see how she laid out the way the room was going to be arranged, which is pretty much the way it is arranged as you see it on the right. You can see things labeled, new chairs or things that she was buying, things that she already had are labeled as well. And so I think that's an interesting piece to have. One thing that shows is a rug on the floor. There's no rug. These were all done with wall-to-wall carpet. You can see if you look on the valance for the curtains, how dark they are. So that was one of the indications that we really needed to do some refurbishing here. So here's a full picture of that room before renovation. Here are the fabrics, the original on the left, the refurbished fabric on the right. So we really were able to stay pretty close, I think, in look and feel for this fabric. The original fabric is still available today, but I thought if I'm refurbishing a room, I want it to look like it's been refurbished. So we actually ended up changing the fabric. And this is what it looks like now after refurbishing. So again, tried to stay with the look and feel of what Ms. Daniel had. And here's the bathroom as it was, and here's what it looks like today. And then the last room on that floor is the red room, or the Nixon room. This is where Richard Nixon actually spent the night when he was visiting the Daniels once in the early 60s. This was the hardest room to find fabric for because red toile fabric is not as popular today as it was back in the 50s. So it took us a while to find the fabric, but we were able to find something that I think is very similar. So again, on the left is the original fabric, on the right, that's what we've used for the refurbishing. And this one we just finished last week. So you are the first people to see the refurbished red bedroom. And it's not quite complete. We're going to have to do some recovering of the furniture that you see there. That doesn't quite match with the shade of red that we have. But you can begin to see what this room is going to look like and how much lighter and brighter and better it looks now that we've refurbished it with some new fabric. Here's the bathroom that goes with that room, and this is what it looks like today. We're still waiting to do the curtains, which is why you don't have a picture of the curtain, because it doesn't exist yet. So we're almost finished with that. Our next project, I think, is going to be this room, which was Ms. Daniels' study. And what's causing us the problem here is that's not wallpaper, that's fabric on the walls. And so the challenge is finding somebody who can actually hang fabric on the wall as opposed to wallpaper. So hopefully we're going to be able to find somebody who can do that. If you look closely up in the upper left corner, you can sort of see right under the molding, there's a lighter strip. And below that, it's darker, and that's the dirt and the age and the coal dust that is in the fabric that's in this wall, which we haven't been able to figure out a way to actually clean it. So I think we're going to have to replace it. So that's our next challenge. Here's what the windows were like when Ms. Daniel had them. They actually had panels which dry rotted and were gone by the time we got here. So that'll be another decision we'll have to make, is do we go back and put those panels back in when we do the refurbishing. So it's been kind of nice to have these drawings available so that we can see when we don't have actual pictures sometimes of what we're going to be shooting for. And so that gives you a very quick tour through White Oaks and lets you sort of see some of the things that we've been doing over the last, that's probably been a 3 to 4 year project. Obviously, we had to take a year or so off with COVID and had to stop some of our refurbishment efforts, but we're getting there. So now I'll take any questions and hopefully I'll have some answers.
Well, yeah, thanks, Charles. I'm going to stop your share since that's the end of the, or maybe if you want to see here, I can do it.
Oh, I guess I'm stuck.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we do have questions. And remember, if you have a question, just pop it in the about how you pay for this. Is there an endowment to help pay for the maintenance? Did Mrs. Daniel leave money to help take care of the house?
So there is an endowment. It is not enough to do all this. So one thing that happened was, this is really the first refurbishment effort that's taken place at White Oaks in 25 years of the inside, other than the 2 renovations that I talked about. Mm-hmm. And so some of that endowment has been spending off money and hasn't been used. And so we've got a bit of money there. The cookbook, the proceeds from the cookbook go into a fund for upkeeping White Oaks. And so that's another way that we have been able to pay for some of this. So we do it as we have money available. Which
is like all of us, so yeah.
Which is like, yeah. Which is another reason it was put on hold for a year during COVID.
Yeah. The 2 chairs you showed with all the appliques, and I had this question too, are they used or do we just look at them?
No, they are used. People sit in them all the time.
Great.
Everything in the house is used. We don't treat it like a museum. And so things get broken, and they get broken. If we can get them fixed, we get them fixed. If not, then we take them out of the collection. But everything is used.
Okay. What precautions are you taking to protect these restored pieces of furniture, protection from light, dust? Well, you just mentioned we do sit in them, people spilling things. You know, what kinds of thought do you put into that?
Yeah. So yes, people spill food and beverages on them. We have a couple of chairs that probably need recovery because of some of those stains. The light, a few years back, they actually came and put a UV coating on the windows so that hopefully the sunlight is not as big of an issue as it was at one point. Mm-hmm. One of the refurbishment things that we're looking at is replacing all the windows in the house, because these are all single pane wooden windows, very little insulation, and some of them are starting to show some wear and tear and rot and some of the mullions and that sort of thing. And so we're looking at figuring out how can we replace the windows. And when we do that, there'll be the UV protection as well.
Right.
Dusting, we just dust a lot when it needs it.
This next question, it looks as if the material used to restore the first and maybe the other chair are contemporary. Was there thought to using age-appropriate materials? And for the wood pieces, did you use varnish that would have been the same thing used at the time?
So from what I understand from the conservator who did the work, that was not the original fabric. And so what we were replacing is not, I guess it's not appropriate to the period in which the furniture was built. Again, one of the challenges is cost. When you start going back to these age-appropriate fabrics, the cost starts going way up. And so we sort of have to balance keeping things in the same manner in a way that we can afford and that will also have the look we want. And I think it's probably the same for the varnish as well. I think some of them have probably had things done to them through the years that we just don't know about. But again, I think by using people who are trained in conservation work and people who do museum work, and that's the level of people that we're using, that we're getting the right conservation and refurbishing methods that we want.
Okay. So who makes the final decision on which pieces should be restored or refurbished?
I do.
Okay.
And really that's based on the conservator that came in and did the analysis. And she documented all the pieces that she looked at. We have a condition report. She highlights things that she thinks needs to be done. And then she sort of gave me a list with 3 categories of urgency.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started at the top of the urgency list. And I think we've almost gotten through everything she had in the most. Now we'll start working our way down as we have availability and money to do that.
So this question popped up when you started showing the upstairs bedrooms. Who gets to stay there?
So the people who come visit us get to stay there. So they are used. So I was telling Nancy before we started, our daughter and her boyfriend came for Christmas and ended up coming with COVID that they didn't know about. And so our daughter's boyfriend quarantined in that first room, the blue room. But anytime we have guests who are not family, the family typically stays in the 2 bedrooms above our den. But everybody else stays in those bedrooms. So they do get used.
Okay.
In fact, when Elizabeth was inaugurated, every bedroom in the house had somebody in it.
I'm sure.
So,
We have a question from a former museum curator. I assume you're keeping records of all your work for future generations. Would that
yes,
yes,
I am. And that's I'm doing that because I haven't had records to go on as we've done it. I can't tell what's been done in the past. So I have all the reports from the people who are doing the conservation work. I keep notes. I've got for the refurbishment, I'm building a document that has all the pictures of what was there before, the pictures of what we've done to refurbish, all the fabrics, the manufacturers, and all that good stuff. So that will be here for people in the future who are interested in knowing what we've done. So hopefully those are going to be good enough work for them to go on.
So, and I think this might be in respect to the bedrooms upstairs. Why did you use wall-to-wall carpet rather than refinish the floors? And perhaps that's what you've been there.
So the wall-to-wall carpet is what was there when we got here. We didn't replace it. So I don't know if the Daniels put in the carpet or if it was done at some point after they left.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they're hardwood. I think they've checked and they're not hardwood floors under the carpet, which is what I was really hoping, so that we could pull up the carpet and have the hardwood floors. But that is something we'll be looking at In the future, we're going to have to do some painting in the near future, and at that point, we'll look at the carpet and taking care of that.
The next question is asked if you use the Furman greenhouse. You might want to talk about your beautiful grounds and your groundskeeper there.
We do not use the greenhouse on campus because we have 2 greenhouses here on property. And we have 2 full-time groundskeepers. We have a rose garden with about 200 rose bushes in it. That's where we get all of our roses. They've just started blooming. So from now until probably the end of November, we'll have roses that we can work with if we need to. We have daffodils, hydrangeas, peonies that have just started blooming for this year. We have iris. We have a bunch of other perennials in our perennial cutting garden that we can use. Daylilies. I'm trying to think what else we've got out here. We've got some other lilies in the garden. So most of the flowers, I think I've only used a florist maybe 4 times in the 7 years we've been here. The rest of the time, it's stuff from our gardens, and then I'm the one that puts them all together.
So you mentioned it had been 25 years. So 25 years is since you got the house. Is that right?
Yes.
Since Furman took the house.
Furman got the house.
So the question is, why did it take so long to start doing the restorations that you're doing? Or
so I think it's been, one thing you have to think about, and what Elizabeth will say is, you don't want to spend a lot of money on the president's house, because that has to come from somewhere, and the big source of revenues for a university is tuition. And you don't want to slight the students in order to do something to the big president's house. So part of it, I think, has been that it hasn't needed it as much as it does now. And also, I think now we're finally in a position financially that we can do some of that. And the other point is, it takes somebody who's interested in doing it to actually get it done.
Yeah, you're doing some good work. Here's a fun story. Is there a built-in pool, or was there? I live on South Warwick, and my 90-year-old neighbor who built in his home mentioned everyone would have to wait for Mrs. Daniel to fill her pool before you could get water.
Yes, there is a pool that holds about 100,000 gallons of water.
Wow.
And the reason they used to have to wait for Ms. Daniel is because there was no filter system. It was a freshwater pool. And so whenever they needed to change the water, they drained it and refilled it.
Wow.
When Furman took it over, they actually put in a filtration system. And so we never empty the pool anymore. But it is still there, and we do still use it. Let's see.
And then the one question, and we'll end with this one. Mary's asking about the house being open for tours. Mary, you're new to Ollie, or fairly new, but in the past, Charles and other presidents' families have hosted Ollie for a tour with one of the docents of the public parts of the house. And when COVID's over, we will certainly pursue getting that tour set up again. It's a lot of fun, and often we've had the gardener do a little piece of that as well, which is just wonderful.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to have people back at White Oaks. So yes, when we can open campus back up, I would love for y'all to come out and see it. I guess I saw somebody want to know where it's located.
Oh,
so if you're familiar with Rowford Road, so we're sort of right down the street from the Woodlands. So if you cross White Horse Road, so from Poinsett Highway on Rowford Road to White Horse Road, and then we're just past there before you get to Green Valley Country Club.
Yeah, so very close to campus, but not on campus.
Yep.
Okay, well, Charles, this has been wonderful. We really appreciate your time and the insight into the work you've been doing to take care of the house and the furnishings. I found this very interesting, and I'm sure our group did as well.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed doing it, and it sort of spurred me to get some of these documentation's done. So that's been a good thing. And I don't know if anybody actually did the rummer, but the reason that was the cocktail is because that's one of the historical cocktails that they serve in the Colonial Williamsburg taverns. So I thought that would be the attachment of White Oaks and Colonial Williamsburg.
Yeah, well, you're getting lots of thanks in the chat here. I hope you're seeing those.
I do appreciate that, and look forward to having y'all over.
Yeah, we will hold you to that. And I will. Oh, somebody said it's a killer cocktail, so somebody did try it. We had hoped to have one more of these events next Friday, but it kind of fell through. So unless we are able to replace that in a hurry, this is our swan song with the Upstate Cocktails with the Curator. But what a great way to end. And we are thrilled that so many joined us tonight. And like all the others, this recording we placed on our YouTube channel. So anyone who missed it or wants to go back and see those great pictures again, can do that soon. It'll be up there in the next couple of days.
And if you're looking for something to do Tuesday at noon, it's Den's Day, and we will be cooking in the kitchen at White Oaks, making sweet potato muffins out of the White Oaks cookbook.
Great,
So,
and I'm glad you mentioned Den's Day. We will be raising money for Den's Day as well. Den's is short for Paladins, which is Furman's mascot. And any gifts to Ollie are going to go to the Ollie Faculty Enrichment Fund, which supports Furman faculty with summer research, and they're encouraged to use those monies to hire a student to work with them. And then they come back to Ollie to present their research. So we're helping faculty, we're helping current students, and we get new programming. So it's a win all the way around. We've already endowed one of those research programs, and we're well on our way to having a second 100,000 to be able to support 2 programs every summer. So we hope you'll be generous. You'll be getting some emails about that Monday night, Tuesday morning. So happy Den's Day on Tuesday. Wear your purple and find ways to support Furman.
Great. Y'all have a great weekend.
Thank you. Good to see everybody.
Thank you.